Have you ever wondered why your favorite brand suddenly changes its packaging or launches some wild new product? Well, here's the thing. None of those decisions happen in a bubble. Nope, they're all being shaped by this powerful, constantly shifting world of outside forces. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this marketing environment and see exactly how it pulls the strings on pretty much every move a company makes.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by figuring out what this environment even is. Then we're going to break down the heavy hitters, the competitive, economic, political, and legal, technological, and of course the sociocultural forces. All right, first up, what exactly is the marketing environment? Let's take a look at how businesses have to constantly keep an eye on and react to everything that's happening around them.
Okay, so the official definition sounds a little academic, but it's actually pretty simple. The marketing environment is basically everything outside of a company that affects how it does business. We're talking everything from getting its hands on raw materials to actually selling the finished product. A good way to think about it is like a weather system. It can bring these perfect, sunny opportunities, or it can whip up some serious storms that marketers have to navigate.
So when you're faced with all these forces, you've really got two ways to play it. You can be reactive, which basically means you just accept that this stuff is out of your control and you try your best to adapt. Or you can be proactive, where you actually try to influence and shape those forces yourself. It's kind of like the difference between being a raft, just getting tossed around by the ocean waves, versus being a speedboat captain trying to steer a course. Now let's dive into the first, and let's be honest, the most direct force every single business has to deal with: competition. This is the battlefield. This is where marketers live and breathe every single day. Now, competition is so much more than just the other guy who sells the same thing. It actually comes in 4 different flavors. First, you've got your brand competitors. Think Coke versus Pepsi. Super direct, super obvious. Then there are product competitors. They're in the same general category, but with different features or prices. Think a high-end sports car versus a practical minivan. Then it gets broader. You have generic competitors. These are totally different products that solve the same basic need. Like, instead of buying that minivan, you just decide to take the bus. And finally, there are total budget competitors. This is, well, it's pretty much everything else competing for that same dollar in your pocket. Like, should I buy that new video game or should I go out to dinner? You know, the number of competitors out there really defines the whole game. This table lays it out perfectly. On one end, you have a monopoly, where it's just one seller calling all the shots. And on the complete other end, you've got pure competition, which is just a total free-for-all. Most companies, though, they live somewhere in the middle, in what we call an oligopoly or monopolistic competition. All right, next up, economic forces. This is all about the money. It's about the power of the purse. What determines if a customer can actually afford your product and if they're even willing to spend their cash on it. The economy is never static, right? It moves in this cycle, and there are basically 4 stages. When we're in prosperity, things are good. Unemployment's low, incomes are high, people are out there buying stuff. Then you hit a recession. Unemployment starts to creep up, and people's spending power goes down. A depression is like a recession on steroids. Really bad. And then finally, you have a recovery where things start to turn around and head back towards prosperity. And let me tell you, your marketing strategy has to be totally different for each one of these stages. At the very heart of all these economic forces is a customer's buying power. It's pretty much what it sounds like. It's their financial muscle, all the resources they have, from cash to credit, that they can use to buy things. So, where does that buying power even come from? Well, it starts with your total income, right? But then Uncle Sam takes his cut. What you're left with after taxes is your disposable income, and that is the first number that marketers really pay attention to because it's the total pot of money that people can either spend or save. But for a lot of marketers, the real magic, the number they really care about, is what's left over after you pay for the boring stuff. So once you've paid your rent, bought your groceries, covered the necessities, that leftover cash is your discretionary income. This is the fun money. This is what people spend on vacations, new gadgets, concert tickets. And that's the pool most brands are really fishing in. Okay, so beyond a customer's wallet, there are these huge, powerful external rules that decide what marketers can and can't do. These are the political and legal forces, the official rules of the game. Now, while there are a bunch of government agencies keeping an eye on businesses, for marketers, there's one you absolutely have to know: the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC. Think of the FTC as the main watchdog. They're the ones enforcing the rules against things like false advertising, shady pricing, or misleading packaging. Of course, it's not always the government setting all the rules. A lot of times, industries will try to regulate themselves, maybe through a trade association or something. This has some definite pros. It can be cheaper, and maybe the rules are a little more realistic. But there are cons too. The rules are often way less strict, and there's no real power to enforce them if a company decides not to play along. And now, for the force that is constantly rewriting the entire playbook for everyone, technology. It is, without a doubt, the engine of change in our world. The impact of technology is kind of like a snowball rolling down a massive hill. It just keeps getting bigger and faster. And that's because of three key things. First, its dynamics. It is always changing. Second, its reach. It touches literally every single part of our society. And third, it's self-sustaining. Each new piece of tech becomes a building block that helps the next invention get here even faster. And finally, we get to what might be the most human of all these forces, sociocultural. This is all about people. It's about culture, our shared values, our beliefs, our lifestyles, all the stuff that ultimately shapes what we care about and what we decide to buy. You know, one of the biggest sociocultural shifts happening, especially in the US, is in demographics. Just look at these projections. The country is becoming so much more multicultural. And for a marketer, that's not just some interesting statistic. That is a massive call to action. It means you have to rethink and diversify your strategies to connect with a way more diverse group of customers. And another really powerful sociocultural force is something called consumerism. Now, this is not just about shopping. Consumerism is the organized movement by people and groups to protect our rights as consumers. Through things like lobbying, boycotts, and public awareness campaigns, these groups can put a ton of pressure on companies to do the right thing. Phew! Okay, so we have covered a lot of ground here. Competition, the economy, laws, tech, culture. After going through all of these massive external forces, what's the one thing you really need to remember? It really just boils down to this. Successful marketers are not fortune tellers. They are expert observers. The goal is not to somehow magically predict the future. The goal is to build a system for constantly scanning, analyzing, and then responding to the world as it's changing all around you. And that idea of being a great observer, leads us to one final question for you to think about. When you look at all these forces, economic shifts, new tech, cultural changes, which one of these do you think is going to shake up the world of marketing the most over the next 10 years?